Hi everyone, this is Koinzell here, and today I want to talk to you guys about the Dendro Traveler. Because as I've mentioned before, I will definitely do the Dendro Traveler, and this is what we are doing here. For Dendro Traveler, I'll talk about his kit, his basically his talent, passive, constellations, just like what we've always been doing for Math Guide 1, or whichever character that we are doing. And we're going to be into the math, the rotation, and the damage, and then we do a comparison versus Collei. In order to be fair, I will do the same team and rotation that was done for Collei previously. So this is Dendro Traveler or Traveler stats, and we're going to use the new craftable weapon, Timber Blade / Sapwood Sword here. Because I think a lot of people are looking forward to this weapon for Traveler. Although if you ask me, PJC will be a better weapon for Traveler if you want to build him as a sub DPS. Although if you have PJC that some other 5-star character can use, 5-star sword character can use, then it might be better to use that on that 5-star character or the other 5-star characters. But nevertheless, let's look at this weapon. Or rather, let's look at Dendro Traveler, this weapon. So this weapon is actually very simple. Once you trigger a Dendro related reaction, it drops a leaf that when you pick up, it gives you 60 EM at R1 and 130 EM at R5. Sorry, it is 120. There's a typo here. Okay, so it's very, very straightforward. But the problem is that it's a leaf that is only applied to whoever picks up. It's a buff that only applied to whoever picks up the leaf. So remember that. Now let's go straight in and talk about the talents, passive, constellations, kit summary, some notes and assumptions. We'll talk about rotation, damage, and DMC versus Collei in the Tighnari Yae AggraSpread comp, which is 24-second comp, if you remember the dual DPS comp. Okay, because we did Collei in this comp, so that's why I'm doing it in this comp again. Okay, just so that the comparison is fair. Alright, so first off, let's talk about talents. Now, Dendro Traveler or DMC is not an NACA character, so we're going to skip looking at this talent. Let's talk about the elemental skill, Razor Grass Blade. Now, skill damage wise is not too bad, honestly speaking. 391.68%, 460.8% level 12, 8-second cooldown, so it's a more spammable skill per se. And the skill itself is also very simple. It's a simple white slash that looks to have a small, but okay, not exactly big AoE. I don't want to call it very small, but for AoE's range, it's not that big. Okay, but it's white. It's definitely white. Okay, so I'll say it's small but white AoE, and decent multiplier, especially considering 8 seconds. Now I know people are complaining that the DMC energy generation is low, but it's because it's on 8 second. Okay, so it generates 2 energy, 50% chance for third, which means it's about 2.5 energy on average. 2.5 Dendro energy particles. So you should try to use Dendro Traveler E 2 to 3 times in one rotation if you can. Now in our rotation later, you'll see that it's 2 not 3, because the rotation doesn't really allow the Dendro Traveler to be able to use it 3 times in a row due to the certain actions of other characters. So I would say that because of the need to use it 2 to 3 times, it also means that Dendro Traveler requires slightly more on field time. But it's not a lot. At most it's one more second, for example. Yeah. Although this does fit well with R5 of Vernier Sword, because every R5 of Vernier Sword allows you to get the 3 neutral energy particles every 6 seconds, if I didn't remember wrongly. So it fits well into the 8-second cooldown here. But I'll talk more about weapons later. Okay, next, Elemental Burst Q, Surgent Manifestation. So for Surgent Manifestation, it's essentially a skill where, it's a burst where Traveler lays down a lamp that can be further transfigured by 3 elements. If you apply Hydro onto the lamp's AoE and the AoE of its attacks are increased, which helps with your quadratic scaling. If you apply Electro to it, the lamp's attack speed is increased. And I'll talk more later about the difference, how fast or how frequent the attack is with or without this attack speed buff from Electro. And if you apply Pyro, the lamp will explode after a short delay and then disappear, which means it immediately ends your DOT. Because what the lamp does is that it does DOT damage. And I'll talk more about the multipliers. You'll see that the multipliers, some of it are pretty high, yeah, which is good news for DMC. Now, one thing to note though is there's only one transfiguration within the lamp's duration, which means that if you infuse something like Pyro, the lamp will be gone. You can't infuse anything else. If you infuse something like Hydro, it will stick with Hydro the whole time. You can't change it to Electro, you can't change it to Pyro. So there's no way to buff it with either Hydro or Electro, and then when it's near expiry, you hit it with Pyro to do a explosion. I'm sorry, but it doesn't work that way. There's only one transfiguration allowed. Okay, so this is the tick. Every hit from the Lee Lotus lamp, it does 136.27%, which if you have seen the Collei figures, it is pretty much almost double. It's almost double of Collei's ticks, but the difference is that Collei ticks a lot faster than the Lee Lotus lamp, and I'll talk more about that later. Total, if you did not infuse it with Electro, we are talking about, okay, so there's a 12 and 50 seconds. There is, by default, is 12 seconds. There is a +3 with C2, so that gives you 15-second duration, which is more DOT. So the total damage increases. So at level 9, we are talking about 1363% with C2 and 1603% at level 12 with C2, which, you know, is Traveler, so we will eventually get those. In fact, I think in 3.0, we should be able to get C2 minimally. And then you have the Electro Total, where the multiplier is much higher because of the increased attack speed. And I'll talk more about that, how I derive all this. It's really through frame-by-frame analysis of whatever we have available in terms of footage right now. But you just need to know that it's 2317% at level 9 with C2 and 2725% at level 12 with C2. Quite easily the highest attack multipliers that Traveler has so far. I may be wrong, I did not do the full comparison, in-depth comparison, but I think it is the highest. Okay, now obviously you don't always hit every single tick, right? So even if I assume that it's half, right, it's still 681%, and 802% level 12, still pretty good for a burst multiplier, really. And that's for without Electro. If you infuse Electro, it's 1158% and 1363%. Good stuff. As for the Pyro, you'll notice that it's about 5x of the ticks. Okay, it's about 5 of the ticks. Up front, you deal 5 of the ticks. Think of it that way, win a large magic explosion. But the downside is that Traveler's Q requires 80 energy, and it's on a 20-second cooldown, as opposed to Collei's, which is on 15-second cooldown and 60 energy. But the cooldown aside, right, the most important thing is the energy required. So it's pretty tough on the energy requirement, and I'll talk more about that later. Right, now let's talk about the next point, which is the number of ticks, the AoE, the Q size, as well as the quadratic scaling. So Lee Lotus lamp hits 1 tick per 1.5 second. Collei's Q hits 2 ticks per second. It's basically 1 tick per 0.5 second for Collei. So do you see now why the multiplier is higher than Collei? In fact, in the same time, if you're not transfiguring it with Electro, in the same time that the Lee Lotus lamp hits 1 tick, Collei will have done 3 ticks. So it's still more. Now, if you did not do Electro transfiguration, 12 seconds will give you 8 ticks total. 15 seconds is 10 ticks total. So remember, 12 seconds is the base, 15 seconds is with C2. With Electro transfiguration, it's 1 tick per 0.9 second. So, I mean, per 0.9 second, I know it sounds a bit weird, but Raiden's E is also doing a 0.9 second proc. It's doing 1 tick per 0.9 second as well. 1 proc per 0.9 second as well. So not too surprising per se. And how do I know 0.9 seconds? Really because I went frame by frame. Okay, it's not like trying to average it out through slow playback. You really need frame by frame to do this. So basically, with the Electro transfiguration, 12 seconds, the base gives you 13 ticks, 5 more than 12 seconds. At 15 seconds with C2, it's 17 ticks versus 10 ticks. Now the reason why is because although I say it's 0.9 second, you gotta realize the first tick actually happens 0.5 seconds after the lamp is placed. It doesn't trigger immediately when your lamp is placed. It doesn't trigger 0.9 second or 1.5 second after your lamp is placed. is always 0.5 seconds after the lamp is placed. Again, frame by frame analysis is this. Okay, so that's why you have such number of ticks. Now, since it's AoE damage per hit just like Collei's Q, it's very similar to the quadratic scaling that Ganyu or Ayato or Collei has. Now the Q field size, if you did not do any transfiguration, it actually looks the same as Collei's. So it's like as small as Collei's. Should I use the word small? Okay, it's basically not as big as Ganyu or Ayato. It's the same as Collei's if you did not infuse it with anything, or specifically if you did not infuse it with Hydro. Now the AoE size per tick also looks pretty similar to Collei's or slightly smaller. I can't really, it's very hard to judge the difference, but the difference is not big. Okay, so you can think of it this way. If you have watched my Collei Math Guide 1, you'll know what I'm trying to say here, which is the fact that the Q field size is not big, but the AoE is decent. So quadratic scaling should be easier if you can keep your enemies within that smaller Q field size. But if you did a Hydro transfiguration, what happens is that the Q gets doubled to Ayato's Q, almost the same as Ayato's Q or maybe even bigger, while the AoE size per tick is also almost doubled. So basically it's like double the Q field, double the field and double the AoE tick with Hydro transfiguration. With Electro transfiguration, you get what, 70% more ticks, 70% more damage over the same, within the same time. Okay, so really 70% DPS. While the other gives you bigger field, bigger AoE, in order to for it to be easier to hit the quadratic scaling. But if you do have an animal character in team, you don't really need that bigger field. Okay. Now, in terms of overall multipliers, it's also really strong if all hits hit on a single target, but that target has to be boss level big in size. Okay, I mean this is pretty straightforward stuff by now. Primo Jovishet should be enough with a smaller Q field size, unless it's transfigured with Hydro. If it's transfigured with Hydro, then you'll need a boss size like Ashtaha. And of course, it's assuming that the mob or boss or whoever stays within the field. So just like Collei, right? This is a Q that has quite a bit of variance in terms of its damage. The total multiplier show the average worst case scenario half ticks. Yeah, I already covered this. Best case on single will be all ticks, and with quadratic it will be even better than this here. Okay, if you know how quadratic scaling works, yeah, because when the explosion B hits both enemy A and B, it will also hit A. So A gets hit more than just the single max number of ticks. Now, this is really pretty impressive, especially considering that it's Traveler. In fact, at full ticks, I can tell you that the Electro Transfiguration does more overall damage than Collei's full ticks in a full tick versus full ticks scenario. But it's actually less at half ticks. Why? Because Collei has an upfront initial damage, but Traveler is purely DOT. Collei has a higher upfront initial damage, 300 plus, almost 400%, and then it starts the DOT, whereas Traveler is just pure DOT. So this is with Electro Transfiguration. Without Electro Transfiguration, Collei still does more, but Hydro obviously gives you bigger AoE, Pyro gives you upfront burst, so there are factors like that. But even if without Electro, Collei doing more just based on the talent multipliers, DMC has EM scaling. He has EM scaling on his Q, he has EM scaling on his E, which is basically he has EM scaling on his entire kit. Kit that matters. You're not going to use his NA or CA. You should not use his NA or CA. Okay? So we'll see later how he fares math-wise with the EM scaling going in. Does it allow him to perform better than Collei? Now, I want to do a quick note on the Pyro Transfiguration. I have to say I'm not a fan of it, because the most important thing is that it ends the off-field Dendro application. Because you're going to use DMC as a off-field Dendro applicator. You don't want it to end so early. And not to mention, you also stop your quadratic scaling DOT prematurely. Because the moment you transfigure it with Pyro, it's going to explode after a short delay, like less than 1 second. And that's it. Your lamp disappears. Your off-field Dendro continued application disappears. Now, if you are in a comp with Pyro and Dendro, you're probably kind of afraid afford to wait for more hits before you do a pyro transfiguration, because the whole purpose of putting a pyro and dendro come together is because you want to do all the pyro related reaction, be it burning or burgeon. So waiting for it just doesn't fit the rotation. Now pyro aspiration being equivalent to about 5 ticks of damage, right, means that you actually need to wait 0.5 seconds before applying any pyro to match the typical full duration of the attack multiplier. You know what I'm trying to say here? I'm saying that if you want to at least match the total number in terms of the attack percentage, you have to wait 7.5 seconds before doing the pyro transfiguration. This makes your rotation very difficult to manage because those 7.5 seconds, like I said, you want to be reapplying pyro for your burgeon, for your burning, etc. And somehow you need to make sure that you don't transfigure the lamp with pyro during that period. It's not good. And like I said, you also can't infuse with hydro electro first and then try to do pyro for final BPM of the queue so that you get all the different type of reactions ongoing before you finally go for BPM, because the lamp can only be transfigured once. The moment you transfigure your hydro, you can't do electro or pyro on it. The moment you do electro, you can do hydro pyro on it. So I don't know. I think it's probably a good idea to avoid pyro with Dendro MC unless you have another Dendro with continuous off-field Dendro application. Okay, but first thing first, whatever I'm talking about here is in a scenario where you want the Dendro Traveler to be doing continuous Dendro off-field application and damage over time as well. But if for some reason you're trying to do like, I don't know, a YouTube video where you want to show one-shot damage from Dendro Traveler, then you can consider doing pyro, and then you add banner, you add Kazuha, all the different type of buffs, etc. Doable for a one hit against boss kind of scenario. I'm not saying that it is terrible. I'm just saying that it kind of goes against what you probably want to do. Use Dendro Traveler for other than a one-shot gimmicky kind of video. Okay. So yeah, so those are my notes on the queue, the elemental queue. I know I spent a lot of time on this, but there's a lot to talk about because it's quite a unique talent. All right. So I hope this in-depth analysis is helpful to you guys. Now let's go on to the passives. Verdant Overgrowth. There's only 2 passive because that's the way Traveler works. Okay. So this passive basically allows a EM buff to your team, but it's only an active character. Lay Lotus Lamp will obtain 1 level of overflowing Lotus Light every second is on the field, increasing the elemental mastery of active characters within its AoE by 6. Which means only the active character in the field gets the EM buff. It doesn't apply to off-field character like Yae or any other off-field character in your team. Now, total the max stats that you can have is 10. So each stat is 6, you have 10, so maximum is 60 EM buff to the active character within the field only. Now remember, EM is dynamic. Okay, since quite a long patch ago, they have already fixed EM to be fully dynamic regardless of whether the character skill snapshots or not. EM is always dynamic. Okay, so active within field type of EM buff is not great for off-field characters. So like I said, it's nice for Dendro MC to provide EM buff, but to be honest, it's pretty pathetic if you think about it. It's 1 stack giving you 6 EM and it gradually increases every second. So you need 10 seconds to hit the 10 stats. 10 seconds to hit the 10 stats and the 60 EM. Your Q lasts for 15 seconds. In terms of rotation, by the time you are done with most of your main stuff, after you are done with most of your main stuff, then you get the full stacks. But there is something that will help this later on. We shall talk about that as well. So the two pathetic things, like I said, the gradually increasing amount with a low increase as well and limited to active character. C4 helps with this, but it's still not that great because, again, it doesn't solve the fundamental issue with the C4. It can't buff off-field characters and it still starts with a lower amount than Collei C4. Okay, although technically speaking, you can say that then DMC C4 is free, right, compared to Collei. But DMC C4, we don't even know whether we'll get it in 3.0 if you look at how Inazuma was like for EMC. Now, the next passive, however, I think is good. I like it. Every point of elemental mastery the Traveler possesses increases the damage dealt by Razor Grass Blade by 0.15%, which is the same scaling as Yae on her E. And the damage dealt by Surgeon Manifestation is increased by 0.1%. So this is not as high as the Q buff, but it's still higher than Tighnari's 0.06%. So this passive is worse apart from the first passive, to be honest. It's really good that Traveler gets EM scaling on both E and Q, with E matching Yae Miko's and Q being higher than Tighnari. It's almost double, 0.1 versus 0.06%, almost double, right? Now, in a comp with EM team buff setup, Traveler may deal more damage than Collei at the expense of some off-field Dendro application. So yeah, it's not bad at all. That's why I say that Traveler may have a bigger potential to be built as a sub DPS than Collei. But it's very, very dependent again on whether you manage to get your tits all done, etc. Stuff like that. Electro Transfiguration, EM team buffs, you need those in order for him to be able to skill to be better than Collei. But is he really better than Collei? Don't worry, we'll talk about it in the comparison. So next is Constellations. So C1, after E hits an opponent, it will regenerate 3.5 energy for the Traveler. So this is nice, it helps with the ADT energy burst, but honestly, it would have been better if E generates more particles to begin with, because each Dendro particle is 3 energy for the active character that's of the same element taking it. So if Traveler receives it, it's 3 energy for Traveler. I don't need a 3.5 energy passive. Because this 3.5 energy will not scale with your EM as well. It's a flat amount regenerated to you. Sorry, not EM, ER. It does not scale with your energy recharge. You can have 200% ER and this skill only gives you 3.5. C2, more DOT, more Dendro application, no Dendro reactions required to extend, unlike Collei C2, right? I mean, this sounds good, right? As said, most AT energy DOT bursts have 15 second duration to begin with, or something in key to increase it to 18 seconds. So case in point, Shenhe starts with 12 seconds, just like Dendro Traveler, but her key increases it to 18 seconds on C2, if I'm not wrong. And a lot of other characters have it at 15 seconds space, be it 4-star or 5-star. And someone like Ayato has it at 18 seconds at C0. So to be honest, this constellation is kind of scammy. It's good, but it only brings Traveler up to par with existing characters, put it that way. Okay? It only brings Traveler up to par with existing characters. I don't know whether I'm being harsh here, but you guys get what I'm trying to say here, right? It's like his kit was purposely made worse, and then they give a constellation to make it on par with existing characters, but it looks like, oh, he or she has a good constellation. But it's like, alright. Anyway, next is increasing the E level by 3, pretty straightforward. Bit surprised that it's not increasing the Q though. I thought the Q is the better talent. Let's talk about C4. After the Lay Lotus Slam, triggers a Lotus Light Transfiguration, which is the Hydro, Pyro, or the Electro Transfiguration. It will obtain 5 stacks of the overflowing Lotus Light effect from the passive talent. You must have unlocked this passive talent first, obviously. So basically, you get 30 EM upfront once you trigger this, but it still needs another 5 seconds to hit max EM buff. So I guess it goes from terrible to bad. It's still bad because it still does not buff off-field characters. It only buffs the on-field active character, and it still needs to take another 5 seconds to hit 60 EM. I'm really not a fan of his EM buff to the team, or rather to one character. C5, again, increase the level by 3, pretty straightforward. C6, let's talk about his C6, or her C6. The Dendro damage bonus of the character under the effect of overflowing Lotus Light, as created by the Lay Lotus Slam, is increased by 12%. If the land has experienced a Lotus Light Transfiguration previously, the character will also gain 12% damage bonus for the corresponding element. So what this means is that, let's say if you did a Electro Transfiguration, you get 12% Dendro damage bonus and 12% Electro damage bonus. That doesn't sound too bad, right? I mean, at first glance, it's a nice constellation, but I see 2 issues. Number 1, it's only 12% instead of 20%. Usually, damage bonuses, you get 20% from constellations. I give you C2 Tighnari as an example. I give you one of the constellations on Venti as an example as well. And then you have C6 Sucrose, right? So why is this 12%? And number 2, which is the biggest con, or biggest disadvantage, is limited to overflowing Lotus Light. which is the EM buff that is given to the team. And again, it's only to the active character in field. So this is pretty much useless for Yae official or any character who does off-field damage. Especially for someone like Yae who skills off EM. Oh, but then again, this is not about EM, this is about damage bonus. So the damage bonus, even if you have Fisher in team who doesn't skill off EM, because it's limited to overflowing Lotus Light, unless somehow your Fisher is on field, you're not gonna get your 12% electro damage bonus if you transfigure it with an electro. So it's kind of scuffed, really. Alright, I mean, this is one of the weakest C6 I've ever seen. But then again, maybe it might be the best for Traveler. I can't remember what was the other C6 before this. Okay, so to be honest, right, if you look at the Constellations individually, they are really not bad at all. But the problem is that they are just improving a bad or below average kit to bring it to average at best. And this is a very, very important note I want you guys to be aware of. It's very unlikely that we get full C6 in 3.0 if we take Inazuma as a reference. Because, if I didn't remember wrongly, I believe C6 Electro Traveler was only available in 2.1 or 2.2. I know that because I remember that the material used to gain further constellations on Traveler was limited by the Sakura tree offering. And surprise, surprise, Dendro also has a tree. I think it's called Tree of Dreams, something like that. So I do believe that the same kind of structure will be there, and your C6, our C6 DMC will only come 2.1, 2.2. So in case you think, hey, at least these are free constellations, right? There's an additional trade-off for being time gated. You're not going to get everything in 3.0. You're not going to get a C6 DMC in 3.0. I would be very, very surprised if they give us C6 DMC in 3.0 instead of 3.1, 3.2. Okay? Alright, so I've talked about the talents, the passive, and the constellations. Let's talk about the kit as a whole in summary. High Q multiplier, yeah, in total, with bonus strategic skilling, just like Collei. Decent E multiplier, but more users required, so more on view. Uptime on Dendro application is about 75% uptime if you do 15 seconds out of 20, right? At C2 is about 60% without. And I'm talking about off-field Dendro application, in case you ask me to include the E. Okay? At C2, it's 75% at C2 and 60% without. So it's pretty nice considering it's Traveler or MC. So, but it's a bit lacking versus Collei. But like I said, there are many factors of Traveler's kit that are kind of scuffed, like the low EM boost and also the low damage boost at C6. And again, all of this is only to the active character in the field. It's not to the whole team. It doesn't apply to off-field characters. There's no snapshotting of EM. And also the low base Q duration. Like if DMC Q duration was 15 seconds to begin with at base, and C2 adds it to 18 seconds, that would be really good. But it's not. So I would say the entire strongest thing in Electro Traveler or in DMC's kit or Dendro Traveler's kit is the EM skilling on both E and Q. It is only this EM skilling that I can't outright say that Collei is 100% better without doing the math. If DMC did not have this EM skilling, I'll just say that I can 100% be confident and say that I can be very, very confident and say that Collei is 100% better. So we have to look into math since the DMC does have this EM skilling. And also, just bear in mind, just like Collei, right? In most comps, you will be looking to buff the main DPS, not Collei or DMC. So best to manage your expectations on the damage, yeah? Like I said, I do see bigger earlier, right? Like I said earlier, I do see bigger potential for DMC as a sub DPS rather than a Dendro of your applicator or enabler. Or rather, he can do it, he just can't do it 100% uptime. Okay? A quick note on weapons. For my Mammoth, like I said, I will use the new craftable Sumeru sword. Although I personally do not like having to pick up a leaf or chili pepper. It's a waste of DPS to do so. Okay? Regardless of what you say, that chili pepper dropping down from Xianli's score bar. No matter what, you need to move, you need to dodge, you need to dash to get it. And sometimes it's so hard to pick it up that sometimes you may miss it. I don't know if you guys have tried it before, but if you have used it, I think you should have known what I'm talking about. So that's a waste of DPS. Okay, that extends your rotation. No two ways about it. Now, the other thing is that Leaf will be picked up by other characters in team that have EM skilling. Example, in this Yae Tighnari comp, rather than letting Dendro Traveler pick it up, I think it's better to let Yae or Tighnari to pick up, right? But if you don't have such other characters, I guess DMC picks up then. Okay? So if you want to focus his sub DPS, obviously PJC is the go-to option. And I heard rumors that we are going to be getting PJC along with Hunter's Path on the 3.0 weapon banner. If that's the case, that'd be awesome because I don't have PJC and this time around I'm not letting it go. Even if I get Hunter's Path before I get PJC, I'll still continue pulling for PJC. Put it that way. Now, Favonius is also a good option for support if there are no other Favonius wielders in the comp. Now, I'm not saying that they can't stack. I'm just saying that usually one is enough. Right? Okay, so I hope you guys understand where I'm coming from with regards to Dendro Traveler's kit. But although I keep saying that his kit is kind of scuffed, right? Aspects of his scuffed, right? It doesn't mean that he's bad. He's not trash for sure. Not like, I don't know, Animal Traveler. Okay, so let's talk about important notes and assumptions. So since we already have a common rotation from Tighnari Math Guide 2, I will use that, which is the dual DPS comp. Timber Blade / Sapwood Sword and a new artifact set Dual Memories will be used here because remember, Tighnari is your main here, so Dendro Traveler will be using this. Okay, so it's exactly the same as Collei in terms of artifact. Weapon wise, I know that I'm giving Collei an allergy, which has a higher base attack, but you know that's something else that helps her in terms of the stats. Kinda, it's really more of a support weapon on allergy. So I'm using Timberblade / Sapwood Sword here because for a character like Traveler, I kind of making an assumption here that if you are really interested in DMC, maybe you're someone who doesn't want to give her or him PJC, which is why I'm using this sword here. And the reason why I say Timberblade / Sapwood Sword is because both names are available there. I don't know what will be the final name for that craftable sword. Okay, so we'll just put the both of the names here. Another thing is that I'm assuming that DMC have standard ICD across his or her attacks. Okay, wait, that's a copy and paste. She's using a sword, okay. Now, Catalyze is similar. We are also saying that Catalyze, the note here, wrong the assumption is that Catalyze is similar to Superconduct rather than EC duration wise, i.e. it will last a full 7 seconds, even if you add reactions onto it. With DMC's Electro Transfigured Q, in terms of reactions, we will assume that more Catalyze / Quicken than spreads will be triggered. Okay. Now it's possible for Electro to trigger the Catalyze instead, but there are two Electro characters with continuous off-field application. So yeah, I think the scenario of the Electro already been there when the DMC's Dendro damage is being dealt is higher. So for the purpose of my math, total number of reactions for C2 DMCQ is assumed to be 6, and I will assume 4 Catalyze, 2 spreads. For DMCE, it's going to be 1 spread on the first E and Catalyze on the second E. If you look at the rotation, you know what I mean. So total 5 Catalyze, 3 spreads. That's what I'm assuming here. Okay. But it's very, very similar to how I'm doing the assumption for Collei. I am also assuming more Catalyze than spreads. Alright, so this is fair. Alright, so this is the rotation comp. And then the ER. So let's look at the rotation first. Yeah, don't look at this first. Look at this first. Okay. Rotation is exactly the same as the rotation with that was covered in Tighnari Math Guide 2 with DMC replacing Collei. But there's an additional 1 second added to the rotation. Why? Because Tighnari needs to pick up the leaf. Or rather, there's whoever it is needs to pick up the leaf. Your character has to go pick up the leaf. Has to be done. Have to be done. Okay? So, rotation is 25 seconds, not 24 seconds. That's number 1. Number 2, these are the ER values required to hit the energy. Okay? Energy wise, we are doing okay. But you'll notice that the DMC is going to need more ER from artifacts. And I'll talk more about that later when we look at the stats. So Tighnari also has to increase his ER by 6.8, which is about 1 artifact upgrade. Because there's lower energy from DMC. I mean, it's 2.5 energy instead of 3 energy. 3 energy from Collei, 2.5 energy from Traveler E. And if you see here, I can't really squeeze in another DMC E or Traveler E without breaking apart some of the action here. Because some of these actions should be done in a row instead of switching halfway to DMC, for example. That's one. Number two is if I add another E, the rotation will be further extended to 26 seconds, which is bad for the overall DPS as well. Okay. Yep. So yeah, so like I mentioned, using this weapon, there's one additional second wasted to pick up the leaf, so that's gonna happen. And leaf is also limited to one character, unlike allergy buffing the whole team. I know this is with regards to weapon, and I'm talking about a 4-star and a 5-star weapon. But the reality of the situation is that DMC uses sword, so she can't use allergy, which is a bow. That option is not even there. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, obviously not everyone has allergy. I can fully appreciate that. But I'm also talking about the fact that I don't even have the option. If you have the weapon, you can't even do it. Alright? Now, in case it wasn't clear, the low ER of Yae and Tighnari in this comp is largely thanks to 2 Favonius procs on Dory, plus her Q energy regen. If you use some other electro, obviously the EI requirements will increase. For example, if Fisher replaces Dory, Yae's ER should not increase, but ER for DMC and Tighnari will probably have to increase significantly. So bear that in mind, yeah? Okay. Alright, now we are getting to a more interesting part of this entire video, which is DMC's damage in a Tighnari Yae AggraSpread comp. Obviously, before we look at the DMC overall damage, let's look at the artifact penetration and stats. So it's pretty much the same as Collei in terms of the artifact layout. We have the attack, damage, CRCD piece, and then you have 1 main EM piece, 2 main EM piece, and finally 3 main EM pieces. Just to see whether the EM skilling on Traveler is it that important, especially in the AggraSpread comp. Okay, but one thing you notice is that the CRCD is actually lower. Like for Collei, I can afford to go something like 62 CR with 168 crit damage. Yeah, but I can't. I have to go for lower stats here because this sword only gives you 30.6 ER, unlike Allergy that gives you 55. So what that means is that I also need higher ER on Traveler, so Traveler is going to have to get some ER rolls, ER upgrades, 2 ER upgrades across another 2 base stats. Okay, which is why the CRCD reduces. So although you have EM skilling on Traveler, you kinda have to spread your artifact stats a bit thinner. Some of the CR stats have to go to ER because 80 energy burst and lower energy regen on her. I've already included 3.5 energy, by the way. Okay, now let's look at the damage. So this is, you'll notice that R1 and R5 is the same, right? Because I'm assuming that the leaf is being given to Tighnari. So when you go from R1 to R5, the leaf goes from 60 to 120 EM, the buff that it gives to that one character who picks up the leaf. So that is assumed to be going to Tighnari, which is okay, right? Because in the first place, when I'm going to compare against Collei, Collei is also giving EM to the whole team. It's just that Allergy is giving it to the whole team instead of Leaf giving only one character. Again, I know it's 4-star and 5-star character, but like I said, it's a bow versus sword kind of situation where I am able to use Allergy on Collei, but if I have Allergy, I can't use it on DMC because he or she is using a sword. Alright? So this damage figure, honestly speaking, is not too bad. And like I said, although we are using this, it only goes to Yae or Tighnari, okay? It doesn't go to DMC. And bear in mind, rotation here is also aimed at maximizing Tighnari and Yae's damage, just like if I use Collei in the comp. Without Allergy, there's also no EM team buff available for DMC other than C4 Tighnari. But yeah, C4 Tighnari is a very costly investment, yeah? So DMC's buff is only to active character, i.e. not DMC. So DMC's 30 EM rising to 60 EM buff is not going to be applied to Tighnari. Sorry, it's not going to be applied to DMC. You're not going to be on field with TNZ. You're not going to be the active character in the Lotus line with DMC. Okay? It's going to be Tighnari in the rotation. So considering DMC is a free character, I mean, even if, okay, putting aside, right, even if you don't use Tighnari, even if you use your DMC as a single Dendro character, that single Dendro character is still going to be a off-field character. Doesn't make sense to use Dendro DMC as a off-field character because you do nothing after casting your E and your Q. You should switch off-field. Okay? So considering DMC is a free character with a free C6, although it's time gated, I guess the damage above can be considered decent. So let's look at what the most interesting thing in this video, I will expect. Let's look at the comparison against Collei next. By the way, these damage figures have already taken into consideration the EM scaling. Alright. Oh, right. I need to talk about the EM, right? Okay, sorry about that. Yeah. So the EM is here. We still have our Dendro passive resonance. However, the weapon effect, the leaf, is not applicable to Dendro Traveler. The Dendro Traveler passive is also not applicable to him or her, so it's not here. Okay. In fact, if you don't have C4 Tighnari, you'll notice that the total EM when you go attack Dendro is not that great. It's 200 EM. I know it's not high, but it is what it is. Okay. Let's look at the damage versus Collei. So I wanted to give two different views. I want to give one view without C4 Tighnari and one with, because without C4, I can't remember whether I did the with C4 Tighnari. I think I did. Okay, sorry, I actually did this math guide quite a few days ago, but I haven't gotten to recording it until now. So without C4 Tighnari, Collei, these are the updated figures for Collei. It's actually only slightly lower, at least for Collei, because remember Collei doesn't scale with EM. And then you have DMC figures here. This is the difference, and you also have a percentage difference against C6 DMC. Okay, this is per constellation, like C0 C1 Collei versus C0 C1 DMC, or C2 Collei versus C2 DMC. This is the percentage figure. This is how you read the table, and this obviously is every different stats of different constellations of Collei versus C6 DMC. So without C4 Tighnari plus C4 Collei plus R1 allergy, there is no EM buff for DMC. DMC's EM buff is only applicable to the active character infield, which is not DMC. Okay, I think I've said enough of this. DMC should not be on should not be the active character on field. So the leaf from his Timber Blade / Sapwood Sword should be given to the better DPS like Tighnari or Yae in the team. That should be pretty straightforward. So at the same constellation level, DMC always perform worse than Collei in this comp. You can see, right? R1 versus R1, R5 versus R5. There's no negative figure here. So when they have the same constellation, Collei always perform better than DMC in terms of their own individual damage. But since C6 DMC is free, we should compare C6 DMC versus Collei, right? And we can see that C6 DMC with Timber Blade / Sapwood Sword is more or less similar to C3 / C4 Collei at R1. I'm gonna just assume R1 here. Not everyone has R5 allergy. This is comparing Collei with allergy, by the way. So if I just look at R1, right, it's minus 0.8%. Okay, it's more or less the same. Let me just put it as more or less the same, although it's in favor of C6 DMC. But it's just slightly better by 0.8%. So it's more or less similar to a C3 / C4 Collei when you have C6 DMC with a Timber Blade / Sapwood Sword. However, remember, we are likely to get C6 DMC only in 3.1 or 3.2 if we use Inazuma as reference. So in 3.0, I'll say a C0 Collei will be better or similar to C2 / C3 / C4 DMC, because I don't know what, I can't remember exactly what constellation level we got. I can't remember whether it was like C2 2.0, C3, C4 2.1, C6 2.2 for Electro Traveler, or was it like 3.3 or 4.2? So whatever the case is, I can tell you just based on the figure itself, a C0 Collei will still be better or similar to a C2 / C3 / C4 DMC, which means in version 3.0 itself, since there are rumors that Collei will be given as a free event reward, that free C0 Collei is going to be better or similar to whatever constellation of DMC we can get in 3.0. You see where I'm coming from? Okay. So last point for comparing their individual damage. the DMC Q damage, which is majority of DMC's damage, is spread over 15 seconds instead of 9 seconds like Collei. So one has a much longer duration, the other has a shorter duration, but 100% uptime through other means, which basically is a sprout. So when you see DMC's performance in game, it's not going to feel good. I can tell you that. I can upfront tell you guys that it's not going to feel as good as Collei. Because Collei, you see more hits and more damage coming in within just 9 seconds, whereas DMC is 15 seconds. Okay? And all of this is even with the EM scaling factored in. All of the EM scaling has to factor in, and this is still the result. Now let's talk, this is just individual by the way, okay? Let's talk about the impact to overall team DPS when you use DMC over Collei. So number one, without the ability to use allergy, there is no attack percentage and EM buff to team. And since both Yae and Tighnari have EM scaling here, so it's quite a bit of loss in terms of team DPS. Second point, even if you do not have allergy to begin with, DMC's EM buff to team is also active character only versus C4 Collei's entire team EM buff. And yes, eventually as an F2P, you will still eventually get C4 Collei. It can happen. Okay? Just ask the long-term F2P players. So another thing is DMC EM buff also needs time to grow to 60 as well. It's not like Yae's, right, where the damage percentage is quite substantial, so you don't mind it growing and stuff like that. Anyway, third point, using Timberblade or Setwood Sword, which is a new Sumeru craftable sword, extends rotation by 1 second to pick up the leaf. If you don't, but here's the conundrum: if you don't use this weapon, you lose out on EM buff on your main, because there are no other options. Freedom Zone doesn't give you attack buff. Freedom Zone doesn't give you EM buff. It gives you attack and NACA buff. So it's a team loss, DPS loss either way, unless you want to give Traveler a Freedom Swan, which you can easily trigger the effect with your Q and E, mainly with your Q. So you can still give CA bonus to say someone like Tighnari, but you still lose out on, you still don't have something like EM that can buff both Tighnari's E and Q as well as Yae's E. So still a team DPS loss really. Okay. Now with the team DPS impact above in mind, the difference between a C0 and a Collei and C6 DMC wouldn't be worth it. Because remember when I said that a C6 Collei is better, a C6 DMC is better than like a C0 Collei, right? We are talking, yes, it's 11%. But if you look at the absolute figure, we are talking about a difference of like what? 17k? No, 16k. A 16k damage figure difference, which I assure you the team DPS buffs, etc., the team buffs, will allow your other characters, especially your main fully built characters, to do more than that 16k difference. Okay? And lastly, just FYI, C5 Collei, I actually did the math for this. C5 Collei still does more than C6 DMC with the leaf taken by DMC. Okay, so I think I'm not going to show the with C4 Tighnari figure, because in the first place, if you have C4 Tighnari, you are going to have C6 Collei, because they're on the same banner, right? So there's no point for me to show the with C4 Tighnari figures. Yes, now I remember. But I did do the math, and because C4 Tighnari also gives you 120 EM, which is exactly the same as the R5 Timberblade Setwood Sword Leaf effect, I have the math figure here, so I can tell you guys, a C5 Collei still does more damage than a C6 DMC for their own individual damage, with DMC taking the leaf. Like if you say it's unfair for me to let Tighnari or Yae to take the leaf and then compare against Collei, right? Even if I do take the leaf, a C5 Collei still does more. So to be honest with you guys, I hate to say this, but I'm not going to waste the limited Sumeru resources in 3.0 on DMC. Don't forget that we are getting a lot of new characters in 3.0. You're going to need a lot of new resources to farm from scratch. There's no pre-farming that can be done. Very, 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 very minimal pre-farming that can be done. Everything has to be done when we get Sumeru. So all the more, the resources will be very limited at the initial version, the very, very first version of Sumeru 3.0. So I'm not going to waste my resources, limited Sumeru resources on DMC. I'm sorry, but I honestly wish DMC was as feasible as EMC though, but yeah. Alright, now artifact means that even with EM scaling on DMC, attack/damage CR is still the clear winner here because you gotta remember one thing. Our overall available CRCD is lower than say someone like Tighnari who has a worse EM scaling than DMC. So this is the reason why getting the typical kind of attack damage CR build here is still better than fully focusing on EM. Of course, this is an AggraSpread comp where the aggravate and the spread reactions can crit. When we go to bloom related reactions, maybe a EM damage CR might be better. I can't say for sure until I've done the math. But I don't want to jump to the bloom related reactions without first covering what I want to cover for AggraSpread. Okay, don't worry, I'll cover bloom related eventually, but not yet. Let me just clear what I can first. I'll definitely try to at least cover bloom related before 3.0. We still have like what, 2.5 weeks? Yeah, about, or maybe 2 weeks if you want to be strict. Okay, so I hope this is clear. How did I spend 15 minutes or 50 minutes on DMC? Okay, but anyway, we are now on the TLDR of the entire math guide. Let me quickly run it through with you guys. So point A, unlike Collei, DMC only has 75% uptime on the Dendro of your application with C2, 60% without. So as an enabler support, he or she is not as great as Collei, but I'll say it's still manageable for a AggraSpread because for Catalyze/Quicken, it lasts for 7 seconds. So technically speaking, you should still be able to do your AggraSpread and stuff like that. Okay, you're still able to trigger your aggravate and your spread. Next, DMC talent multipliers are actually pretty good with Electro Transfiguration. But base attack is average for talent DMC. There's no sword with EM boost to team, unfortunately. The new 4-star craftable Timber Blade / Sackwood Sword can only buff one character, and you need to waste 1 second to pick it up as well. If you want DMC to be a pure sub DPS, you can equip a better weapon like PJC. But then if you have PJC, I would think that you will have some other 5-star character that can make better use of it. Kinda? Yeah. Okay, anyway, yes, if you want more DPS for DMC, you can definitely use like PJC. After all, DMC also has quadratic scaling on his or her Q as well. As for artifact builds, if you are using a Dendro main along with DMC or focusing on bloom related reactions, 4DM would be better, for sure. Otherwise, if it's single, you can consider giving DMC 4 Nobliss to provide more attack percentage team buffs. No tenacity, you see I didn't mention tenacity because his E can't do it, right? So DMC, really 4 Nobliss is the option. Now, personal damage for DMC will be lower, while overall team DPS improves. So really depending on how you want to build him. You want to build him as hybrid support, or pure sub DPS. Artifact stat, main stat wise, attack damage CR is the clear winner here, even with the EM scaling regeneration because, wait, why did I say regen? EM scaling effect, because DMC has lower overall CRCD stats with Timberblade compared to Tighnari or Yae who can get much higher CRCD, plus the need to get higher ER. Even with 2S for Volnus and plus 1 Dory Q, because Dory Q also gives you flat energy regen. And I already considered the amount of on-field time that the Dendro Traveler will have. You still get at least like one tick of it, which is like 2.5 energy. Okay, at level 10 of Dory's Q. 2.4 at level 9. So even with the high amount of energy, right, you still need to get more ER. If you don't have someone like Dory or you don't have someone who's giving you 2S for Volnus, he or she is gonna need even more ER, and that takes away even more from their personal damage. Alright? So C6 DMC can still perform better than a C1 or C2 Collei, but it's unlikely that we can get C6 DMC in version 3.0 anyway if we use Inazuma as a reference. And there is really a tree like the Sakura tree with levels in Sumeru, Tree of Dreams if I'm not wrong. So there are also rumors of Collei being an event reward in 3.0 event as well. So to be honest, right, in the long run, I think it's better to invest in Collei, since eventually C6 Collei will be obtained too, right? Through reruns, etc. Even if you may get it later than a C6 DMC. Assuming you skip the first Collei banner, by the way. If you didn't skip the first Collei banner, you might get enough constellations of Collei such that your Collei is still better, right? especially considering the fact that Collei has a potential for better team buffs. Eventually, if you get allergy, or eventually if you get C4 Collei, instantly the team buff that you can give to the team is already better. Okay, now I spent the video talking so much bad stuff per se about DMC, but I want to be very clear here, okay? DMC isn't trash. It's not trash. It's not trash tier. It's still feasible to use DMC. Collei is just better. Okay? Collei is just better. Next video. Whew, can't believe I already reached the next video. So next video wise, Dory Math Guide 1 or Tighnari Series or Yae with Gilded Dreams. I may not necessarily do Dory Math Guide 1 first because I heard from the grapevine that Dory might be on the second phase of 3.0, which means it's better for me to do the Dory Math Guide much later. But anyway, I'm personally undecided on that, and I'll take my time to over the weekend to think about it, and also to do the math so that I can churn out the videos in the coming week. Okay, so that is it for the DMC Math Guide 1. I hope it has been helpful to you guys in terms of the TLDR, the analysis on the kit, the damage in the math, and the comparison against Collei as well, factoring both the individual and the team DPS. Alright, so thanks everyone for watching. If you like the content, remember our video and click subscribe for more. See you guys next video. Bye.